Welcome to the TTA offices in Austin. We are wanted to give you a little tour of our facilities here. You can see how close we are to the Capitol. This house was built shortly after the Civil War and has been here in constant use near the Capitol for all these years. It is actually the closest privately owned structure to the Capitol building in Austin. We're about 1,000 yards from the actual back door of the Capitol. So if you'll come on in, the original house was just 3 rooms, and it has over the years had many interesting folks that have owned it and have lived here, including a former governor, and also when Sam Rayburn, who was later the Speaker of the United States House, was here in Austin, and the Speaker of the Texas House, Mr. Sam, lived here. So we have a lot of history. If you'll come on back, I'll show you the remaining part of the building. So the original building actually stopped here, and then they've added on, there's a second story, and then we have several offices here. A few of our member phone companies also office here with us, so we're in really close proximity. This is the office of East Tex. Wes Robinson, our regulatory chairman, offices here, so we are in close proximity. This is our library that we hold. There's a lot of political memorabilia here from other tenants and also from our landlord, Brad Shields, who's been in the lobby for 30 years, 30 plus probably. This is our TTA office. So we host legislators and staff here quite often. All of our TTA awards are on the wall, and it's nice for me because I can stand at that little desk and look at the Capitol Dome every day. So if you come on back, I'll show you the other parts of the office. This is our library and conference room those are old journals from past sessions that we collected, and so we have it set up for meetings. And then if you'll come through, we have our kitchen area. We're fully set up to entertain, and we have staff and legislator lunches here on a pretty regular basis. So in the back, we have several other offices, including Mike Hunsucker from Windstream is in that office. And then this is our conference room with a lot of old political memorabilia on the walls, and we expect to be able to host TTA board meetings here. So I wanted, thanks to Charlie Cano from coming in from East Texas to help us with this today, but I wanted just to show y'all that we have facilities here. We are always open. We always welcome you. If you're going to be in Austin, let us know ahead of time. If you need someplace to have a meeting or just do some work, we have facilities here for you. And we're really fortunate to be all together in this office with other companies, but also to have the facilities so close to the Capitol. So welcome to your TTA offices. Hi guys, welcome to our broadcast. We are very happy to be coming to you. We wanted to use these opportunities to showcase some of our vendors, some that have supported us in the past and that supported our convention. And so we have a promo video from Words South, and I would like to go ahead and roll that, and then we'll go into our political discussion when it's over.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Andy Johns. I'm with Word South, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you guys today. I'm sorry that we weren't able to get together in person back in August, but I'm glad to have this opportunity to introduce Word South to some of the folks that don't know us, and to say hello to the people that we do know and that do know us in the audience. Word South is a 24-year-old, almost 25-year-old content marketing company based in Alabama. We are working with rural broadband providers like you guys to help with all of your marketing and communication needs. When people think of Word South, they probably think of the regional telco magazines, which are some of the more well-known pieces that we do. We do those magazines for Hill Country, for Peoples, for East Tex, for VTX1 and Colorado Valley there in Texas. We also do about 22 editions across the United States outside of Texas. The magazine, if you are not familiar with it, the main goal there is to educate, inform, and engage your customers or members about what you are doing with your network and how it is helping your local community. To do that, we have 16 pages. It's every other month that it comes out. And in the magazine, 8 of the pages are shared across everybody, and then 8 are local to just your company or cooperative. So you can see it's got a local cover there, but then the next 2 pages are shared across everybody. We've got the NTCA column from Shirley Bloomfield, and then some information on the census and streaming. Good stuff for everybody to know. We've got pages in there. Everybody does a CEO column that we write for you guys and send it over. Dave, I hope I didn't blow your cover there, but we will we'll take care of the writing of all of this for you and provide some of the information there that you see, handy local information for your folks. It has a mix of community interest type stories that will be in there as well, and plenty of technical pieces to explain what folks are using your service for. We do a lot of storytelling about ways that your network is making a difference in your community. We found that that's a much more powerful way to illustrate just what all you mean to the people there and how they can enjoy your services than just talking about bits and bytes all the time. We always make sure, we always make sure to include some content to draw folks in, including recipes and food, because everybody always loves that. And there's always a spot at the back page for whatever promotion that you are running at that point. And the power that we have of running more than 300,000 copies of the magazine cuts that price down per piece fairly low with the printer. So we feel like we have a lot to offer there, and I'd love to talk to anybody if you were considering that or needed a boost to your communication efforts. In addition to the magazine, I'll run through a couple of other things real quick. Word South does websites, and we're happy to be working with Amy out there at West Texas. So we're happy to have that going as well. We'd love to help you with marketing strategy, and really could be a turnkey solution, a real partner with you to accomplish what you want to accomplish. All sorts of print and design work that we could put together for you. Any of that can be translated to Spanish. We have digital offerings, including digital ad campaigns and email newsletters. We offer customer service training for your folks that focuses on elevating the customer experience. We do social media work. A couple of things that I'm excited about coming up in 2021. We are going to roll out 24/7 social media monitoring and response. We're doing that with the help of some employees who are military spouses at U.S. Military bases around the world, so they can keep up with your social media with the Twitter trolls are coming for you or anything like that in the middle of the night. It's the middle of the daytime for them, so we can help you with that starting next year. And then we're also going to be offering focus groups if there are any specific slices of your membership or customer base that you would like to understand a little better. We can help with that. I know that you guys have a lot to cover today, so I don't want to take any more of your time. If you would like some more information, please check out wordsouth.com or email me at andy@wordsouth.com, and we can certainly talk some more. I appreciate the opportunity to say a word, Mark, and we look forward to continuing to support TTA in the future. Thank y'all and have a great day.
Thanks to Andy for putting that together for us, and we're going to have other vendors that we spotlight as we do these Text Connect virtual events going forward. We tentatively, by the way, have the next one scheduled for around December 15th, and we'll be rolling out some details to y'all about that very shortly. So I am very happy to be joined by John and Ian, our legislative team. We deal with each other on a very regular basis. They're both old friends, and they have a lot of very, very good political connections and political instincts. And so we have been monitoring very closely, as everybody else in the country has, how the elections turned out and what kind of turnout we got in the elections, and maybe what that means for Texas moving forward, and especially for TTA as we look at legislative session bearing down upon us. So I wanted to first kind of talk a little bit about some numbers, turnout statistics, talk a little bit about the makeup of the legislature, and then we will talk about what the makeup of the legislature means for TTA's issues going forward. So thanks for being here, boys. We have done some research on voter turnout, and we saw remarkable voter turnout all over the state. I'm going to get to some specific rural Texas numbers in a moment, but we have some slides prepared, and the first one shows that we had a total of 11 million votes cast for president in Texas. That is over 2 million more than were cast in the last presidential election, and substantially more than we had in the last statewide election for governor and lieutenant governor, et cetera. So you can see that our early voting totals obviously were very heavy, and we had a very good turnout. 65% is pretty remarkable for Texas. We normally are lucky if we get around 50. So that was refreshing. And if you look at the turnout, we're pretty evenly matched as we look across the state. The Republicans have probably a million vote advantage, and that is going to bear out when we look at the legislative makeup here in a second. We track very carefully here the counties that are served by our member companies, and I tried to make sure that legislators understand what rural Texas means to the electorate, not just to the economy. And so, Charlie, if you'll show the next one, we had in our member company territories. Now, I left out Denton and a couple of the very large counties that we have a portion of, but in the counties that we touch, there are 124 of them in this model. We turned out 2.2 million voters, and that's 65% of turnout in that area. So it matches the statewide totals. Of those in our districts, in our areas that you guys serve, almost 1.5 million people voted Republican and 750,000 voted Democrat. So when we go to talk to legislators and to the governor, we will be reminding him that our folks vote, they vote red, and they turn out 2-to-1. And all of the margins for the statewide candidates, both in the election 2 years ago and this election, came from this group of 1.4 million voters. So we feel like we have a very compelling story to tell as we discuss matters going forward and how important these telecommunications matters are to our constituents that are very important to our elected officials. We also went and took a look at what people spent on elections this time. I don't have some historic numbers. I'm putting those together, but I found it very interesting. This does not include any super PAC money because that's very hard to track. There are estimates that there were, have y'all seen the super PAC expenditure number for Texas? No, just for Hager, it was $9 million. That we are aware of. But so these are funds that were raised and expended through typical political means, like by PACs like the TTA PAC. And so you can see that the Democrats outspent the Republicans in the House and also in Congress. And they did end up outspending Cornyn in the Senate race, but not with funds attributed here. And those numbers for the GOP are a little bit higher than they were last cycle, but for the Democrats, they were much higher. And there were several movements inside the legislative process with existing state reps to raise a whole bunch of money to try to turn the House and the Senate, especially the Texas House, into a democratically controlled body. And we're going to see in just a minute that those efforts failed pretty remarkably. So we're going to look first at the makeup of the Texas Senate. So we had one seat that changed. Senator Pete Flores from Pearsall lost his race to Roland Gutierrez. Can y'all tell these guys a little bit about Roland? Our consultants have a better understanding and a really good relationship with Roland.
Roland's a long-standing South San Antonio member. Unfortunately, the way that district is drawn, as Rusty will know out there in Alpine, it's the largest district in the state. And but unfortunately, the way it's drawn, it's anchored in South San Antonio, and that's where most of the votes are generated. But I have to say that there was good turnout throughout the district. It wasn't clear cut. Roland Gutierrez got some pretty good numbers in some of the rural counties and was absolutely slaughtered in others. But there was no way for Senator Flores to overcome that South San Antonio base for that district. I think I think it's about 45% of the votes were based just in South San Antonio. I think Roland will be very friendly to us. We discussed USF with him, and he was very receptive. And I think he will be looking to expand his support out in the rural areas of that district. And I'm sure many of you already probably know him, and he's a very approachable member.
And that district has a whole lot of counties in it, and several of our phone companies serve in different parts of it. I think Dave Osborne and Rusty Moore, I know they both serve.
Gary.
And Gary too. And so it's going to be important for us to visit with Roland, and I feel like we're going to have a good contact there. So the Senate moved one seat. I will remind you guys that 22 of the state senators are touched by our member service territories. Some of them are very urban, including Boris Miles and Ms. Turner, Ms. Thompson, and a few other urban senators, including John Whitmire. So we have a good cadre of folks that should be allies when we talk about telecom matters that affect rural Texas. So Charlie, if you want to go into the House, we had a lot of rhetoric here and around the state about turning 6, 8, 10, 12 Democrats, Republican-held seats to the Democrats. And what ended up happening was one district in suburban Houston did flip to the Democrats, but and they picked up one other seat in Fort Bend County. But the makeup of the House essentially remains the same. And so what that means for us is there will not be any huge upheaval in the various staff that work at the Capitol and on committees and their makeup. We're going to talk about the speaker's race here in a few minutes. But this is very significant because a lot of money, a lot of effort, and a lot of promises were made to flip the House and change its control. And those all fell flat. And we even those of us who thought that there wouldn't be much change expected a little bit more than this. So it was a bit shocking that we didn't have more turnover, but it goes to show the power of incumbency, and it goes to show that I think the efforts that the Democrats are putting forward right now are going to have to be significantly adjusted moving forward. Do you guys agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think one thing that was interesting was that while in suburban areas in Texas, while there was a narrowing in the margin between Biden and Trump relative to 4 years ago, there was not a big enough margin gain for the Democrats in those suburban areas. And that was actually countered by significant gains down in South Texas, excuse me, in the Latino community, where President Trump actually gained quite a bit in those communities relative to what he was doing 4 years ago. And so I think the overall net of that, when you look at the down ballot result, is exactly what we've seen. Not a lot of change.
Would y'all characterize it as shockwaves in the Democratic Party over the change in vote in South Texas?
I think so. There's the highest percentage gains for the Republican ticket were all in border counties. Many of them more than 10%. And I think that comes as a absolute shock to the Democrats and means they've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, well, they haven't met the Colstons and Super Dave Osborne.
Correct,
That's the problem.
correct. That's the thing. If you look at a map of I just have to say kudos to rural Texas. When the leadership here in Austin needed rural Texas to turn out, the turnout all across rural Texas matched the turnout levels in the urban areas, and the highest performing counties were all out in rural areas. And I think the leadership needs to understand the important role that rural Texas plays to keeping the status quo the way it was. And that's really what happened. I think all of us were prepared for all kinds of excitement and change and things to talk about. And really everything fell flat in the sense that there was very, very little turnover at any level, and a real vindication of the status quo and the current leadership. And everyone ought to be very proud of playing a role in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, from a demographic perspective, I think it's you can't take, the Democrats can't take the Latino community as a block. They're far more complex than that, and to just assume that Latino community is going to vote Democrat is far too simplistic.
Do you see a split in the Hispanic caucus as the Hispanic caucus will continue to grow? Do you see a split there? I mean, is there potentially a rift between South Texas and urban Hispanic voters?
I think there's potential for that, and there's already always been a bit of struggle. I mean, a lot of Hispanic voters are obviously very conservative on some issues, very, very conservative, and they're the members like Senator Lucio, who's very conservative. You can't really put him in the same block as some of the more fiery liberal urban Hispanics. So there's going to be some friction there, and it's going to be a real challenge for them to keep things together, and they're going to have to figure out a way to accept the various parts of the spectrum that if they want to keep the caucus together.
Gotcha.
Now, saying all that, we have very few Republican Hispanic members yet. But I think there's potential growth there for the Republican Party.
I do too, and in the Valley, which I didn't expect, which is a very big place for growth.
Despite the huge growth in the Valley and the margins increasing for the Republicans, I still want to be clear, it was still overwhelmingly Democratic victory.
So seeing the makeup of the two bodies now, we can sort of predict a few things that we believe will probably happen. I wanted to look first at a couple of dates that are important for everybody to realize that are upcoming here, that are some milestones that will happen, and then we're going to talk about some implications of what this means for TTA. So Charlie, if you'll hop to the next one. So next week, we will start seeing legislation trickle out that will address all kinds of various things. We're probably still going to have thousands of bills filed, but I think we're going to be in very low hundreds in what actually passes. We anticipate that we'll see all of this start. I don't think anything major will happen until after we understand who the speaker is. And we'll have some senators file some stuff that they'll file just to make statements, as they always do. So we will have a couple of different groups here in Austin for TTA reviewing legislation as it comes out, and we will establish tracking reports We also will have an industry bill reading group that will include AT&T and the Cable Association and some others, so that we as an industry can track and work on some things in which we have common goals. And I've had long talks already with my counterparts, both at AT&T and at the Cable Association, about several of those issues that we think we probably are all going to be in agreement on. The ethics code states that a legislator cannot receive a contribution prior to 30 days prior to a session. So before December 12th, the TTA PAC will make distributions to many of our friends who have helped to write letters to support us, others that we feel are really important to our efforts. I can report that up to now, we have almost $100,000 in contributions that have gone out from either our member companies or from TTA PAC. And we feel pretty good about our ability to support those folks that have supported us. And you'll be hearing more from TTA PAC early next week. On December 19th, we have a very important special election in Senate District 30. It is a runoff from a special election that happened earlier in the year. And our friend Drew Springer, who has been a remarkable champion for TTA, is in that election. And we plan on both manpower and financially supporting, giving him as many resources as we can. I'm due to go up and visit with him in a very short order. We're working on that now. And then we're going to have an event and an actual endorsement of him. We felt it was more important to do it in the special election than in the regular, in the pre-planned, in the runoff, not the special election. So the folks in the Texoma region all the way down to Stephenville are going to be hearing from all of us about how important it is to turn out to vote on the 19th and support Drew. Then obviously we have the 12th of January is when the legislative session opens. We're going to talk about how it's going to be a lot different in just a few minutes. But we also, the legislature has 60 days after the opening of session to file all of the legislation that will be considered in the session. So March the 12th is a day where everybody takes a deep sigh and looks at everything that's been filed, and then we move forward into however we're going to handle the processing of those bills. And then sine die will be at 1st of June. And I think we all pretty much anticipate that we're not going to be going home for the summer at that point, and we're probably going to have special sessions to deal with, just because of what we're going to talk about now. Ian and John have done a really good job of using our newsletter to kind of talk about what we think a session with COVID may look like. So y'all want to kind of give an overview, and then we can move down a few other political pitfalls that we may see coming into session.
One of the first things, and probably the biggest impact, biggest impact on the flow of legislation that we're hearing, is that there's the possibility on the Senate side that the Lieutenant Governor will limit the number of bills that members there will try to be a rule implemented to limit the number of bills that members can bring to the committee. And if that's the case, then you're going to see a big slam on the brakes of anything that happens during session. There's nothing parallel to that in the House, but that's mainly because right now we don't know who's leading the House. And so that may happen, it may not. And of course, we don't know who the committee chairs are in the House yet. So when it comes to new speaker, we'll have to get the chamber organized. And we saw this last session as well. So that will slow down the process to a certain extent. As far as the session itself goes, there are still no solid procedures as to accessing the Capitol. There's still talk of requiring rapid testing for COVID before entering the Capitol, and things like how soon those need to be retested, and what kind of test, and where people can go in the building are still being sorted out. It's unlikely that the Capitol Grill, which is the cafeteria in the capital extension will be open as normal. It will likely be curtailed to just picking up food and taking it to either outside or to some place where you're allowed to go and have a bite to eat. The members' offices themselves will likely have individual policies that will vary from office to office. Some will require masks, some won't. Unfortunately, that has become a bit of a political issue. But again, it will vary along with whether or not there will be limits on the number of people that they allow into any office. So there are a lot of questions that are out there with regard to the logistics of it.
Yes, and the Lieutenant Governor has been very clear that he is concerned about the availability of facilities to do business. So the Senate chamber is situated so that they could spread desks out to socially distance on the Senate floor. The House floor is not similarly situated, and they are working through installing plexiglass and potentially moving members into the gallery or to other parts of the Capitol to do business virtually, electronically. There's all kinds of talk about that. There will be basically a reservation system. If you want to go do business at the Capitol, you have to have an appointment, and that will be monitored by DPS, who will administer testing. And so you're going to have a window of a couple of hours that you can go and testify before a committee or go to see members, but all that will be driven by member invitation. So what that means for TTA is a couple of things. One of the reasons that I'm happy that Charlie shot the video this morning is because I wanted to show y'all how close we are to the Capitol in this building, and we intend to use this building as an outreach facility so those members can escape being quarantined in the Capitol. Well, quarantine's not a good word, but being in a Capitol that is under quarantine and come here for meetings and other stuff. And we've got several of them that are very interested in doing that on a fairly regular basis. But the Lieutenant Governor has told us that there are only 2 committee rooms that the Senate controls that he thinks can be used for legislation. And we have 21 committees that have to use those. So the limitation on legislation stems from that. And we don't know if that is really accurate. Constitutionally, it's not. It is the Senate is given the opportunity to set its own rules, so they can pretty much decide how they want to proceed. But it will curtail a lot of activity, and it will have a direct effect on whether or not the Texas Senate will take up a sweeping broadband plan, because I believe that with that limitation that they will not in this session. Moving forward, though, we will approach our legislative preparations as if they are, and we will be working on principles and watching very closely as ideas are developed around any potential broadband. We are treating that separately from the USF issue. We believe that they are, although they are remotely linked, the real argument and issue here is are keeping USF uninterrupted and fully funded at all costs. And so that is my focus literally every day. Moving forward to the House, we do not have a speaker at the moment, although we have several that have declared, and there are back and forths going on between several different camps. We feel like the Republican caucus will have a vote and probably ultimately decide who the speaker will be. The good news is that most of the candidates out there have signed a letter supporting us in our fight with the PUC. And we have Dave Phelan, who is the chairman of the committee, who understands the issue, who is a candidate. Jeannie Morrison from Victoria, a seasoned legislator and possibly the first woman speaker of the Texas House, is a good friend of this organization. And so we feel like we're pretty well established if a speaker should come up. It will likely be a rural member. It will likely not be an urban member. And I think that those decisions probably will get closer by early next week. We may know a little bit more about who we can expect to take over. You want to talk about the budget shortfall and what that means for everything else?
Yeah. Well, officially, we're still not looking good. It's still officially a $4.5 billion deficit for the current biennium. And so it will likely, the budget deficit will likely increase between now and session, driven largely by things like unemployment and healthcare through Medicaid. If we wanted to put a guess on where it would probably be for the current biennium, I would say somewhere around the $5.5 billion mark. Again, give or take, and a lot of that is dependent on what happens here in the next few weeks with COVID. Cases are on the rise again, so whether or not we have any further restrictions reinstated, that could have an adverse effect on unemployment and have the knock-on effect on the state budget. But while that is not by any stretch of the imagination a record shortfall for a current biennium, it's still not good because the rainy day fund is expected to have a little under $9 billion in it for spending. So before we even do anything with the budget for the upcoming biennium, we've already likely spent half of the rainy day fund. And so then we'd have to do projections as to what the upcoming biennium will look like given COVID and what kind of shortfalls we're going to see there, and what kind of demand increases we'll see for services like Medicaid and unemployment, that sort of thing. So there's going to be some money left over in the rainy day fund, but it's not going to be a lot, relatively speaking. The leadership currently, and Chairman Huberty, who's chairman of the House Public Education Committee, and Senator Taylor, who's chair of the Senate Education Committee, are both right now still sticking to their guns that they intend to fully fund the changes from HB3 in the school finance formulas. And so if that's the case, that significantly increased the state spending on education. And so again, room for maneuvering gets a little tighter. There is also increased demand for what's happening with highways and highway construction and maintenance. That will, and keep in mind that some of the rainy day fund is dedicated towards transportation now for those things. So again, maneuvering room is getting very, very tight, and that's sort of if it hasn't become clear, that's kind of the point I'm trying to get here, is that we really are getting into a very tight fiscal situation. You can never take fees or taxes off the table. I would be very surprised right now if there was any sort of significant increase in any of those. I think we're more likely to see cuts somewhere along the line, or delays in payments, things like delaying payments to school districts from the state for one day out of the current biennium, or out of the upcoming biennium and into the following biennium. That saves $2 billion just right off the bat, just by delaying that payment 24 hours. So those are the kinds of accounting tricks that the legislature can use to give themselves a little bit more room to maneuver. But again, we'll just have to see where things go between now and the end of the year to really get an idea as to what the situation is for the current biennium, and then that will have the knock-on effects.
And we have CARES Act money that's already been allocated to Texas that has to be spent by December 31. But we are not sure where it's being allocated or how it's going to be spent, because only 400 to 500 million of the what is reported at maybe 6 billion has been actually allocated. So we still, that's all in the governor's office, I believe, for execution if they're going to do so.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So, and we have talked a little bit about what we anticipate as far as legislation affecting TTA directly and the telecommunications industry. The legislature has never undergone a large PURA rewrite this will be my 15th session, good Lord. But we've never seen that happen in one session, and I think a sweeping broadband initiative is highly unlikely to be able to pass given the restrictions that we've talked about. So the Universal Service Fund, however, is in crisis, and many members agree that it has to be worked on and solved with an adequate and sustained funding mechanism. those two obviously are the two biggest things that we will be working on, but there will be initiatives to do several other things, including allowing trade associations to file tariffs for their member companies, and looking at the rampant and rising number of cities and school organizations that are attempting to get into the telephone business. And those are a couple of places where our friends at AT&T and the Cable Association are in lockstep with us. So there will be many, many other things that come up, but what we're forecasting, I mean now, is 3 or 4 major things that we will be constantly monitoring. And there are always interesting things that come up during the session that affect us, but we will see how that goes. Given that the makeup of the House and Senate did not change dramatically, the redistricting process will still be messy, but it will not be as messy as it would have been had there been more Democrats in either body. So we anticipate redistricting will be very prominent, and a lot in a redistricting session, you have a lot of members that behave very erratically for reasons that you cannot understand until you see the map that comes out that draws their mama's house into their district, because that's how they want it. So we will try to stay as plugged in with redistricting as possible and stay on top of that process. I do not feel like they will be forced to go to the legislative redistricting board now that we have majorities in both House and Senate. So it will be a little bit more traditional, which normally works out better. But there will be many fights amongst members, and members will get paired, and there will be some unpleasantness along the way. So those are some of the things that we're going to watch as we move into the legislative session. And that's really where my prepared stuff is. We've pretty much gone through that. You guys got anything else? And we'll take questions if there's anything out there.
Well, just to digress for a second about redistricting, of course, we have to be concerned about the numbers and the impact on rural Texas. I've heard estimates that we may lose anywhere from 5 to 9 rural districts, depending upon how they figure out how to anchor districts and get the populations. So redistricting will have
It's 5 to 9 in the House.
5 to 9 in the House, yeah. The Senate's a bit easier for them to deal with, and may not have quite as bad an impact on rural Texas. But the House, it's going to be a serious blow. Doesn't mean rural members can't win districts that are anchored partially in suburban areas or things like that, but we have to expect that there may be a reduction in some of our representation.
I agree, and I think that because we will have a rural speaker, all of the announced candidates are rural members. I think that maybe we can offset some of that, and we'll be working to that end. But we anticipate the census numbers will be to us later than normal, but still during the legislative session, so they can actually take up the maps during this legislative session. So we'll see how that goes. 2 other things that I wanted to mention before I saw Kirk Petty was on. I want to thank Kirk one more time for all of the time he spent on dealing with the governor's broadband council. We got a report from them that unfortunately didn't say very much, but we did get a report from them, and he's going to continue to monitor that. And we appreciate the time and effort that he's put in, and what a great and powerful spokesman he has been for this organization. And I don't know if did Jennifer get on?
I don't
Y'all reach out to Jennifer Prather because it's her birthday today. So please send some emails. She's probably off having a good birthday and not worried about legislation. So that's good. So we can open up for questions if anybody has any.
Hey, Mark, this is Robert Hunt.
Yes, sir.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
Good. Thanks for this. I'm wondering, is TTA going to have a legislative committee with a legislative director that's going to meet and talk about legislation? How's that being handled?
Yes, sir. Scott Greener is our legislative chair, and I am actually going to discuss that with the board this afternoon at 4 p.m. So we will, I understand there has always been a legislative committee and we're going to continue that tradition. And I anticipate I've had several members reach out and ask to be included. And so I have a list, and we're going to formalize some of that this afternoon. So stand by, and I'll be reaching out to give y'all that info probably very early next week.
Good deal. Thanks. Appreciate that.
Sure. Anybody else? All right.
Hey, Mark,
Yeah.
question about the electric utilities, and they're building some legislation, AECT specifically. Have you heard anything new or any ideas on what they may be up to?
Our understanding is that they are looking at Virginia and West Virginia as a model to use the fiber that is in their transmission facilities as a pipeline for internet traffic for data across the state. Those are regulated entities by the PUC that cannot have end customer relationships. They are wires and poles utilities. And so their concept is to offer that to our phone companies and to others as a middle mile type of a connection. They have met with some internal problems in whether they're going to roll that out or not. And I am due to meet with AECT's executive director, Julia Rathgaber, next week. So I hopefully will find out some more. But I heard that the effort has stalled a little bit because they just aren't comfortable with where they're going. I think if AT&T gets wind of that, they're going to jump out and be very opposed to it. But it could be advantageous for our companies because we'd have another way to get a pipeline connection to Dallas for you guys and to other internet hubs. So we're keeping an eye on it, but we have a good relationship over there, and they are keeping us in the loop. They just haven't got to the point that they're ready to sit down and share their draft with us yet.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, this is Robert again. Do you think TTA will have specific Texas USF legislation that it will propose, or is TTA going to be a little more reactive and wait to see what's filed? What's the strategy with respect? I know there's at least one bill floating around out there.
Yes, sir. Again, we're going to visit with the board about that, but my instinct tells me that TTA needs to have a very detailed set of principles of legislation that it could support and would support, and the determination as to whether we draft a bill along with TSTCI has not been made yet, but we are working through a bunch of different possibilities and coming up with a detailed legislative statement that could easily be turned into a bill. We wanted to, and the reason that I like to approach it that way is because rather than having debate over a may or a shall in a bill draft, you're actually defining core sets of principles and details under those that could easily be turned into legislation and can easily be related as to legislation that you could support. And we will see, I have already seen several drafts of different things relating to USF that are being floated around by various folks. We look at those, analyze those, take what we think is good and comment on what we think is bad, and that will continue to happen as we move forward. None of those have any authors. None of them are going to be filed yet, but there's some drafts that have been floated around by various folks. And so we're on top of that and are listening very carefully for any rumors that there may be other drafts out there. All right. Well, we are at 10:52 and I wanted this to be 50 minutes, so we got pretty close. Again, I want to thank all of y'all for all your support and for tuning in today. If you have questions or want more information, we have a good group here in Austin that can help. And as you saw from the video, we love to have visitors, so don't hesitate to come by. And you'll be hearing much more from us in the coming days. We will keep you posted on the speakers race and anything else that we hear about USF. And I'm going to go get a download on what happened at the open meeting this morning. I want to make sure that you guys all stay safe. We're going to be thinking about our friends up in the Panhandle, and we have a lot of work going on here on the invasive RFIs that we've all received, and we will be pushing out some templates to you guys about those responses probably sometime next week. So just wanted we're staying awful busy here, but we will weigh into this and make sure that we come out victorious with our USF fight. So I really appreciate it. Thank you guys for supporting TTA, and we will talk to you all very soon.